1953, supersonic flight comes of age when the U.S. Air Force gets a fleet of F-100 Super Sabres, the first production run of a supersonic fighter. Before that, only experimental test planes could break the sound barrier.
Originally designed as a high-speed fighter, it quickly found its true calling as a tough, no-nonsense ground attack plane. But how did it go from being a dogfighting disappointment to a battlefield hero? Let's dive into that story of F-100 Super Sabre, and trust me, it's a pretty wild ride. The F-100 Super Sabre, initially envisioned as an air superiority fighter, revealed both its strengths and significant limitations during its time in combat. Developed in the 1950s, the aircraft embodied the ambition to dominate the skies with supersonic speed. However, its performance in Vietnam and elsewhere demonstrated a stark mismatch between its design intent and the demands of modern aerial combat. Encounters between the F-100 and enemy aircraft were rare, as the jet quickly transitioned to roles other than air-to-air combat. The most notable engagement occurred on April 4, 1965, during a strike on the heavily defended Dragon's Jaw Bridge. 4 MiG-17s challenged a flight of 16 F-100s, resulting in a chaotic melee. Captain Don Kilgus managed to down one MiG-17 after pursuing it from 20,000 to 7,000 feet, achieving the Super Sabre's only confirmed air-to-air kill. Ironically, this achievement wasn't officially recognized until decades later, after Vietnamese records surfaced. Despite the success, the MiG-17s were credited with downing 2 F-105 Thunder Chiefs during the same skirmish. The engagement exposed critical flaws in the F-100's design for air combat. While it was faster than its predecessors, its agility left much to be desired. The MiG-17, though subsonic, was highly maneuverable and could easily outrun, outclimb, and maintain better energy retention than the Super Sabre. Attempting tight turns brought the F-100 dangerously close to a stall, even with its wing slats deployed. Compressor stalls in the J-57 engine, a recurring issue during high angle of attack maneuvers, further crippled its combat reliability. Using the afterburner exacerbated the problem, guzzling fuel at an alarming rate and reducing endurance during dogfights. Tests confirmed these limitations. Project Feather Duster, a 1965 study comparing U.S. fighters against the F-86H Saberhawk, highlighted the F-100's inability to compete with more nimble aircraft in turning engagements. Later evaluations, including the 1968 have drill tests against captured MiG-17s, solidified the grim conclusion. F-100 pilots were advised to avoid turning flights altogether. Instead, they were instructed to exploit their speed advantage, evading threats by diving into supersonic flight, an area where neither the MiG-17 nor the MiG-21 could follow effectively. Even the F-100's role as an escort for F-105 strike missions faltered. Its maximum speed was insufficient to keep pace with the faster Thunder Chiefs, while its limited range restricted its ability to accompany bombers deep into enemy territory. The introduction of the F-4 Phantom II further marginalized the F-100 in air combat. The Phantom, with its superior speed, radar-guided missiles, and higher operational ceiling, became the U.S. Air Force's mainstay for MiG combat and mid-cap operations. The Super Sabre's shortcomings were not solely due to design flaws. Pilot experience often determined outcomes in aerial engagements, and while U.S. aviators were generally more seasoned than their adversaries, ground-based controllers frequently positioned Vietnamese MiGs at advantageous points. This tactical edge sometimes overshadowed the F-100's modest advantages. Despite the occasional romanticism surrounding the F-100 as an underappreciated fighter, its legacy in air-to-air combat remains one of unfulfilled potential. Declassified documents and testing data unequivocally highlight its inferiority to Soviet-era opponents like the MiG-17 and MiG-19. While skilled pilots could coax respectable performance out of the F-100, it was clear that the jet was a better fit for other roles, a realization that paved the way for its reassignment to ground attack missions. The F-100 Super Sabre found its true calling as a ground-attacked aircraft during the Vietnam War. Though it began its service as an air superiority fighter, the jet's limitations in aerial combat necessitated a shift in focus. In this new role, the Super Sabre proved invaluable, demonstrating remarkable versatility, precision, and durability. Daily life for an F-100 pilot involved meticulous preparation. Missions often began 2 hours before takeoff with detailed briefings covering weather, intelligence, on the target, and tactical insights from previous strikes. Flight leads laid out mission specifics, including attack strategies, weapon configurations, and operational logistics. Pilots donned their Gear NX coveralls and .38 revolvers and boarded a crew bus to the flight line. After pre-flight inspections, they fired up the F-100's Pratt & Whitney J57 engine and taxied for takeoff. The Super Sabre's mission loadouts often included 2 large fuel tanks and a combination of bombs and napalm canisters. Takeoff rolls were lengthy due to the aircraft's heavy payload, typically requiring 7,500 feet of a 10,000-foot runway. Once airborne, F-100s cruised to their targets at altitudes of 15,000 to 18,000 feet. Fully loaded, the aircraft struggled to climb higher, underscoring its limitations in this capacity. Upon reaching the target area, F-100 pilots worked closely with Forward Air Controllers, FACs. These airborne coordinators marked targets and provided real-time guidance. The Super Sabre's hallmark precision came to the fore as it rolled into steep dive attacks, releasing bombs and napalm with pinpoint accuracy. The typical snake and nape configuration combining high-drag bombs and incendiary napalm was particularly effective in neutralizing entrenched enemy positions. F-100 pilots often pushed their aircraft beyond design limits to support troops in dire situations. Low-altitude passes exposed them to intense ground fire, but they risked these dangers to ensure the success of their missions. Pilots made multiple attack runs when necessary, strafing targets with 20mm cannons after exhausting their ordnance. Despite their vulnerability to anti-aircraft artillery, the Super Sabres were not deterred. Pilots reported returning from missions with damage that underscored the aircraft's ruggedness. Everything from tree trunks embedded in wings to fuselage spines torn apart by flak. Night missions presented even greater challenges. The F-100 lacked specialized night attack equipment, yet pilots adapted by using flare ships to illuminate targets. Veteran aviators with extensive experience led these perilous sorties, relying on their instruments and instincts to navigate treacherous terrain and strike enemy positions effectively. While the F-100 rarely ventured into areas heavily defended by surface-to-air missiles, SAMs, it occasionally faced radar-directed anti-aircraft fire. Recognizing this threat, some aircraft were retrofitted with radar homing and warning, RHA systems, including small spiral antennas for 360-degree coverage. These modifications were reassuring but proved largely unnecessary. No F-100 was ever downed by a SAM. The relentless operational tempo of the Vietnam War took a toll on the F-100 fleet. Structural fatigue became a pressing concern by the late 1960s, with pilots reporting incidents of wing failures during intense maneuvering. Temporary restrictions on diving angles and G-force limits were imposed until maintenance teams in Taiwan reinforced the aircraft's wings boxes. These modifications restored confidence, allowing the Super Sabre to resume its critical ground attack missions. Despite its age, the F-100 remained a reliable workhorse throughout its service in Vietnam. By 1972, it had completed thousands of sorties, proving its worth as a precision strike aircraft. Its rugged design, combined with the skill of bravery in its pilots, ensured its place as a key contributor to ground operations. The Super Sabre's ground attack legacy overshadowed its air-to-air shortcomings, solidifying its reputation as a dependable and versatile fighter-bomber. As the Vietnam War progressed, the F-100 Super Sabre underwent numerous technological modifications to enhance its operational capabilities. While initially designed as an air superiority fighter, its reassignment to ground attack missions demanded adaptations that balanced its limitations with the needs of the theater. These updates not only extended the aircraft's utility but also addressed critical threats and improved its precision. One of the earliest and most significant modifications was the integration of radar homing and warning (RHA) systems. By 1965, North Vietnam had begun deploying the SA-2 Guideline Surface-to-Air Missile, SAM, a formidable threat to U.S. aircraft. To counter this, some F-100Ds were retrofitted with the APR-24 RHA system and the APR-26 Launch Warning Receiver. These systems featured a set of spiral antennas mounted at 45-degree angles from the nose and tail, providing 360-degree coverage. Pilots received visual alerts from square lights in the cockpit, as well as directional threat displays on a CRT monitor. Although these modifications were reassuring to the pilots, they proved largely unnecessary. F-100s rarely ventured into regions heavily defended by SAMs, and no Super Sabre was ever lost to these missiles. The primary risk for the F-100 remained conventional anti-craft artillery, AAA, rather than guided missiles. Nonetheless, the RHA upgrade exemplified the U.S. Air Force's proactive approach to adapting the aircraft to the evolving threat landscape. The need for enhanced precision led to the introduction of various camera systems for bomb damage assessment, BDA. Some F-100s were outfitted with the KB-18 strike camera, mounted under the fuselage near the wing's leading edge. This compact, V-shaped fairing contained a revolving prism that captured wide-angle imagery of the target area. Larger aircraft carried the combat documentation camera pod on the centerline pylon. Though effective for post-strike analysis, the pod's added drag made it unpopular among pilots. Technological adaptations also supported new methods of blind bombing. One such program was Combat Skyspot, introduced in 1966. This initiative leveraged ground-based radar to guide aircraft onto targets through radio triangulation. While not flawless, Skyspot enabled precision strikes in poor weather or at night, significantly increasing the F-100's effectiveness in challenging conditions. Operational constraints often drove creative solutions, particularly regarding the J-57 engine. The afterburner nozzles of the engine were prone to sticking partially open, causing significant thrust reduction during critical moments. By the late 1960s, technicians began replacing these problematic nozzles with more reliable units sourced from decommissioned F-102 Delta daggers. This modification improved engine performance and reduced the frequency of mid-mission mechanical issues. Structural fatigue emerged as a major concern by the latter half of the war. The demanding nature of low-altitude ground attack missions subjected the aircraft to significant stresses, especially during steep dive bombing runs. Reports of catastrophic failure, such as wings detaching mid-flight, prompted urgent action. Inspection and reinforcement of the wing boxes became a top priority. Maintenance facilities in Taiwan implemented these upgrades, allowing the fleet to restore its original 7.33 G limit and return to full operational effectiveness. The Super Sabre's adaptability extended beyond technological upgrades to the tactics employed by its pilots. Night missions, for example, required innovative approaches. Though the F-100 lacked specialized night attack equipment, flare ships illuminated targets, enabling pilots to strike with relative accuracy. Pilots relied heavily on their instruments and years of experience to navigate these high-risk operations, often under fire. The aircraft's rugged design enabled it to endure extreme damage and still return to base. Stories of F-100s surviving encounters that would have downed lesser aircraft became legendary. One jet returned with a 6-inch tree trunk embedded in its wing, the result of a miscalculated pullout during a low-altitude bombing run. Another landed safely despite losing most of its fuselage spine to anti-aircraft fire. Such incidents highlighted the F-100's durability and the skill of its pilots. Attrition in Vietnam was significant, with 889 F-100s lost, many to operational accidents rather than combat. Despite this, the Super Sabre remained an essential part of the U.S. Air Force's inventory until 1972. Its ability to adapt to new roles and incorporate technological advancements ensured its continued relevance in a rapidly evolving conflict. By the time the war ended, the F-100 had undergone a transformation from a pioneering supersonic fighter to a dependable ground attack platform. While its air-to-air performance fell short of expectations, its contributions to ground support missions demonstrated the value of flexibility in both design and application. The lessons learned from its service influenced the development of subsequent aircraft, ensuring its legacy in the annals of military aviation. The F-100 Super Sabre's service in Vietnam, despite its limitations in air-to-air combat, cemented its place in military aviation history. Originally designed as a high-speed supersonic fighter, the F-100 was thrust into a very different role during the Vietnam War. Although it struggled to perform as expected in dogfights, it proved its worth as a rugged and versatile ground attack platform, leaving behind a complex legacy that continues to influence military aircraft design. The Super Sabre's most significant contribution during the war was its ability to deliver precise strikes on ground targets, particularly in support of ground troops. Despite its shortcomings in the air-to-air realm, it quickly became a dependable workhorse for close air support (CAS) missions, often flying multiple sorties a day. Equipped with bombs, napalm, and machine guns, the F-100 was a vital tool for U.S. forces on the ground. Its adaptability was a testament to the skill of its pilots, who pushed the aircraft to its limits, often in the face of enemy fire. The aircraft's resilience was equally notable. The F-100 was built to withstand significant damage, which proved invaluable during its operations in Vietnam. Even after sustaining hits from anti-aircraft fire or suffering mechanical failures, many pilots managed to return to base, sometimes with shocking damage to their aircraft. This toughness became a defining characteristic of the F-100, earning it respect from the pilots who flew it and the soldiers it supported. However, the F-100's shortcomings in air-to-air combat were undeniable. While the Super Sabre did manage to score one confirmed MiG kill, its performance in aerial dogfights was poor compared to the MiG-17 and MiG-21. The aircraft's lack of agility and low thrust-to-weight ratio made it an easy target for enemy fighters. The U.S. Air Force soon recognized that the F-100, despite its early promise as an air superiority fighter, was not suited for this role in the modern, fast-paced conflicts of the Vietnam War. As a result, the F-100's role in air combat diminished, and other aircraft, particularly the F-4 Phantom, took over the task of air superiority and fighter escort. The F-100's legacy, however, extended beyond Vietnam. It influenced the design and development of subsequent aircraft, particularly in terms of its versatility as a ground attack fighter. The aircraft's adaptability to different mission profiles, from precision strikes to low-level attack runs, laid the groundwork for the multi-role fighters that followed in the decades to come. Its ruggedness also highlighted the importance of aircraft durability in high-stress combat situations, a concept that would be embraced by future aircraft designs. Though the F-100 was retired from U.S. service in the 1970s, it continued to serve with air forces around the world. Its export to nations like Taiwan, Turkey, and France ensured that the Super Sabre's impact on military aviation stretched beyond American borders. The Turkish Air Force, for example, flew the F-100 in combat during the 1974 Cyprus conflict, further cementing its reputation as a reliable ground attack aircraft. In conclusion, the F-100 Super Sabre may not have lived up to its initial promise as a fighter, but it more than compensated in the ground attack role. Its ability to adapt to changing operational needs, its ruggedness, and its effectiveness in supporting ground forces made it a key player in the Vietnam War. The lessons learned from its service, both in terms of technological advancements and operational strategies, would influence the design of future aircraft, ensuring that the Super Sabre's legacy would endure in military aviation for years to come. And that's a wrap on the F-100 Super Sabre. Not the fighter it was meant to be, but definitely a game changer in its own right. If you like this deep dive, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. There's plenty more cool aviation history to come. Got any thoughts or questions about the Super Sabre or any other aircraft? Drop them in the comments and let's chat.